In Germany, hostility towards Muslims is widespread. That's not my personal opinion, by the way, but the findings of a significant new report on Islamophobia in Germany. As reported in the German news agency's website, Deutsche Welle, this is a government news agency, basically DW for short, and I'll link to it in the description below. And they ask the very interesting question, how great is the resentment, racism, and discrimination against Germany's 5.5 million Muslims? The Federal Interior Ministry's findings paint a bleak picture, it says. And I want to read some paragraphs from this article in DW, which I say I'll link in the description below, and make some comments as well. And the article says a hostile attitude towards Muslims is widespread in large sections of German society. Its manifestations are an everyday reality. This is very damning stuff. 1 in 2 people in Germany agrees with anti-Muslim statements. Now, the article doesn't give any examples of anti-Muslim statements, so we don't actually know what they might be. And there's a report that's been published just a few days ago by the, quote, independent expert panel on hostility against Muslims. This is a 400-page report, huge report, that's just been published that the article is based on. And the report actually gives a very interesting definition of Islamophobia, which I'm going to share with you now. It is, quote, the attribution of sweeping, largely unchangeable, backward and threatening characteristics to Muslims and people perceived as Muslim. In this way, consciously or unconsciously, a foreignness, even hostility is constructed, which leads to multi-layered social exclusion and discrimination processes, up to and including the use of violence, end quote. That's a very strong and robust definition of Islamophobia there in the report. And the article says since 2017, explicitly Islamophobic crimes have been recorded separately in crime stats. And since then, 700 to 1,000 cases of insults, incitement, and threats, damage to property, and dangerous bodily harm have been recorded each year in Germany. The report further indicated that across German society, Muslims are perceived by non-Muslims as, quote, lacking the ability to integrate and having a tendency to consciously distance themselves and avoid contact with people of other faiths, end quote. And the article goes on, Muslim women who wear a headscarf report that they are often the target of public hostility. Now, I'm going to pause this here because I've got a friend of mine, I won't say who it is, but I have permission to quote him, by the way. He who lives in England, he's a British citizen, and he went on holiday to Berlin with his wife. And I want just to quote to you what he said. And as I've mentioned, I have permission. I'm not going to reveal their identities. Quote, the fact that this isn't shocking tells the story, writes my friend. When my wife and I were in Berlin on holiday, people stared at her because of her hijab. This is in Berlin. There was one particularly shocking incident when we were visiting the zoo. I've been to the zoo in Berlin. It's quite an amazing place. At one point, he writes, I spotted visitors staring at X, his wife, rather than looking at the animals. It looked as if they were more surprised by her looks than the animals around us. I stared back at them. They did not look to be particularly embarrassed. In the UK, we have serious issues with Islamophobia, but it is nowhere near what happens in the rest of Europe, end quote. That's quite an extraordinary. Now, this is obviously one man and woman's testimony. Please do share, if you've been to Germany, you live in Germany especially, your experiences of Islamophobia, discrimination of whatever kind in the comments below. We're very interested to get some more input on this. I've been to Germany about 4 times in the last year, actually, to Berlin, a unique city. I'm told, although it's the capital city of Germany, of course, it is quite unique and not like other places in Germany. A bit like New York not being representative of America, perhaps, or Paris of France, or London of the UK, maybe. But nevertheless, even in Germany, even in Berlin, I should say, there have been serious Islamophobic incidents. So continue with the article I was reading from. Women wearing headscarves report they're often the target of public hostility. Obviously, an example of that just now. And there is widespread prejudice, it says, against Muslim men who are believed to have an affinity for violence, extremism, and patriarchal values. So says the article. The researchers say that the equation of Muslim piety with fundamentalism is particularly problematic. There's even a willingness to advocate restrictions on Muslims' fundamental rights in the area of religious freedom and to deny them the right to equal participation. Now, Muslims in Germany, as you might know, are overwhelmingly citizens of Germany. These are Germans we're talking about here. And then it goes on to talk about the failure of political parties. And I won't read all this out because it gets quite technical. But anyway, the study looks at Germany's political parties as well. In the German parliament, the far-right populist Alternative for Germany has a manifestly anti-Muslim program. Now, this party recently, I read, actually won seats. This is now actually has power in Germany at the local level. In the biggest opposition bloc, the centre-right bloc of Christian Democratic Union and Regional Bavarian Christian Social Union, there's a latent hostility towards Muslims. And it can be seen in the inconsistent recognition of Islam as part of the German nation or culture, it says. I won't read any more about that, but the federal, you can read about it in the article, of course, in more detail. By the way, the post-communist left party is a notable exception. It's the only party in Germany, apparently, which has doesn't have a prejudiced view. The Federal Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser, described the report's findings as, quote, bitter. She pointed out that among the approximately 5.5 million people of the Muslim faith and culture, most are German citizens. As I say, she says, Muslim life is a natural part of Germany. We want all people in our diverse society to have the same opportunities and rights, she says. Well, I hope she is successful in that. I won't say any more about that. Please do leave your comments and reflections and experiences below. As I said, I've only been there about 4 times in the last year. Once during Ramadan, actually, and I participated in that. And the mosques in Berlin, at least, the ones that I saw, were completely packed. People were orderly, they were devout, they were fasting during Ramadan. There was much goodwill and focus on the worship of God. And these struck me as very law-abiding and good citizens of Germany. And I don't get where this idea that, you know, Muslim men have, quote, an affinity for violence and all that. I mean, I just didn't see any of that at all. But that's just my experience of Germany in Berlin. I'm told repeatedly by people that Berlin is not like the rest of Germany, which I think I get the impression is much more conservative and perhaps more traditional in its outlook, and perhaps less welcoming of Muslims than Berlin is, if Berlin can be called welcoming at all. So there we are. Please do share your comments, and I'd be very interested to learn more about what's really going on in Germany. The situation is difficult, clearly, and is also, as is difficult in France, about which I know a little bit more about. It's not just France. It is a place where Muslims suffer discrimination. It is also in other countries in Europe too. And the UK always seems to come out better, even though not everything is rosy here by any means. It does seem that there is a significant difference in the experience of Muslims in the UK than there is in mainland Europe. Why that is, I don't know. Maybe have a more traditional tradition of tolerance and welcoming people, and you know, live and let live attitude, which doesn't always pan out in Europe anyway. And America is a different story again, which I'm not going to go into in this video. Anyway, enough for now. Till next time.